Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of the Future of Work show. For those of you who've been following our journey, ever since June, we've been having these conversations most weekends with people who have great expertise in an aspect of the future that's going to be relevant to all of us. Now, today's episode, I have a very, very special guest, another academic. I think we've had quite a few weeks with senior academics across the world visiting us. So my guest today is Professor Amit Joshi, who is joining us from IMD Switzerland. And we're going to be speaking about the future of marketing, what's the role that artificial intelligence is going to play in it, and what are the ethical challenges involved. So let me just bring him on.
Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Professor Joshi.
Hi, Shalini.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here with us today. Really, thank you so much
Thank you for
for
having me. Thank
making
you
the
for having me.
time. Which is
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
wonderful. So, can I just ask you, Professor Joshi, how did you get interested in artificial intelligence and marketing as an area?
My actual area of research I started working on was time series analysis. So I used to take these really long data sets in marketing and analyze them and try to understand what organizations are doing. Whether marketing is effective. I did a lot of work in the entertainment industry. Being in LA, I got to interact with those folks. And then over time, as analytics itself evolved, as it became advanced analytics, and then eventually, the whole hype around machine learning and artificial intelligence started. My interest kind of evolved a little bit, and then I thought it's really interesting to try and understand how something like this, technology like this, or developments like this might affect the field of marketing. I mean, is there like a big picture structure? Is there like a framework that we can come up with, rather than just I can apply it here or apply it there. So that's how this whole interest developed, actually.
Well, you couldn't be in a more topical area, to be honest, because wherever you go, today there's a conversation around the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, perhaps not while completely understanding what each of these words mean. And I know that you and your colleagues at IMD have written a little bit about, what really is artificial intelligence and where does it different from, advanced analytics or machine learning. And, one of the things I'd love for you to do is just help us understand what gets characterized as artificial intelligence.
So look, I mean, it's actually a very confusing term in many ways, right? I mean, so first of all, the idea of artificial intelligence has been around with us since the day we invented computers. So since the day we invented computers, we said, one day we're going to replace the human brain. One day we're going to replace human beings with this device that we've just invented, and it's fascinating, right? So in the '60s, there was a time, actually. There's a very famous interview which is available somewhere on YouTube in black and white. You can go and see, and the scientists, and these are really, really smart scientists who are working on this, and they say, 3 or 4 years, in another 3 or 4 years, we've got this. We're going to replace humans. This is the 1960s. Humans are going to be completely obsolete. We're going to crack this. And of course, we know that didn't happen, right? So artificial intelligence is a very general idea. It's an idea of machines that can do things like humans. It can do human-like tasks. So if you want to take a very general definition, even the calculator in your pocket is artificial intelligence, because it can do multiplication, which only humans can do, for example. But I think we all realize that that's not intuitively what we are talking about when we talk about AI. We are talking about, in general, machines that can think or machines that can learn, right? But if you want to say about machines that can think, they don't need to learn. I mean, I can go in and tell a machine exactly what the machine needs to do. And this is how we tried to do artificial intelligence, quote unquote, in the olden days. The olden days being the '80s and '90s for the most part. I go in and I literally give the machine millions and millions of instructions, saying, if this happens, then do that. And the thought was, then if I give you enough instructions, eventually, it'll start doing the things the brain does. Because at the end of the day, that's what the brain does. If I see fire, I don't touch it. If I see water, I drink it. Those kinds of things. It's an if-then kind of a functionality. But what we realized very, very quickly is that that's simply not possible. There's a lot of things that we do in day-to-day life, which we ourselves cannot explain how we're doing it or how we come across the result. And a classic example of that that's given in this field is recognizing your own mother. right? So I come to any of you who are on the show, and I ask you, can you recognize your mother? And say, of course, what kind of a silly question is that, right? Little babies can recognize their mother. And I say,
Mm.
okay, write me a step-by-step instruction guide for recognizing your mother, and that's impossible to do.
Yeah.
We as humans cannot explain why we do something, but we do it.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, think back to your day-to-day life. Okay,
Mm.
think back to how many things you do without just thinking about them. And we call it common sense, we call it intuition, whatever. We can use whatever word you want, gut feel. But at the end of the day, we can't explain why we are doing it, but it's the right thing to do.
Mm.
Riding a bicycle. I mean, can you write me instructions to ride a bicycle that I can read and start riding a bicycle? The answer is no. You
Mm.
can write instructions, but I can't ride a bike or swim. So that's where this concept of machine learning came up. So again, this is not a new concept. It's been around since the 80s, at least. There were a few problems in the 80s, which was basically we didn't have enough computing power and we didn't have enough data. So we couldn't run machine learning, besides small Mickey Mouse type problems. So the last 10 years, what has happened is we've have enough computing power and data. That's it. That's the only magic ingredient. And now we can learn machine learning. So what's the difference with machine learning? So
Mm.
machine learning is not artificial intelligence. Machine learning is one technique that we try and come closer to this idea of artificial intelligence. Like I said, there are many other techniques. But machine learning is just, the coolest technique in the last decade or so. And what we do with machine learning is we say, okay, I will not tell you, machine, I will not tell you how to do something. I will give you tons of examples and you will learn by yourself. So the underlying algorithm in machine learning is a learning algorithm which converts examples into patterns. So for example, I don't need to tell the machine what my mother looks like. I just give the machine millions of photographs of my mother, and then when the machine sees one more photograph, it says, oh, yeah, with an 89% probability, I think this is Amit's mother or not Amit's mother. So I have not told you how to do something. I've just given you millions of examples and then let the machine figure out what is common amongst those patterns and then do the same pattern recognition outside. So it's just a pattern recognition superhuman, right? But that's machine learning. So machine learning is one way that we are trying to do artificial intelligence, but in the recent times it has been the most powerful way, and it has
Mm.
really demonstrated some interesting things in the lab. So those two things are not really the same, artificial intelligence and machine learning.
I think in one of your recent articles, you spoke about a lot of software which gets sort of termed as artificial intelligence is, in fact, advanced analytics. So, would you just speak a little bit about, how that happens and how, as a wise business consumer, you understand what is what?
You're right. I've written a little bit about this. There's a temptation today, especially since AI is a really hot term, to just slap the term AI. It's like in the 90s and 2000s, just slap the term .com in front of everything, and suddenly your valuation triples or something like that. So AI is one of those things currently. Uh, I mean, people might be doing relatively simple statistics at the back end with no real learning going on, but they can still call it artificial intelligence or machine learning or something because it's a hot term. I like to joke that, anytime you're pitching to VCs, you call it artificial intelligence. Anytime you're really recruiting, you call it machine learning. And when you're implementing, it's statistics. Okay, so that's really what's going on behind the scenes. Uh, if you want to know if somebody or if a firm or a startup or a vendor that's pitching to you is really using machine learning, okay, if they're really using machine learning, you should ask them a few questions. So you should ask them saying, okay, what type of machine learning are you using? Because there are three broad types of machine learning: there's supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning. Most of what you see in the field in applications is supervised learning. Where are you getting the data from? Because, like I said, machine learning is standing on two legs today. That's it. There's no magic. It's computing power, it's brute force computing power, and it's crazy amounts of data, just crazy, crazy amounts of data. So, where are you getting the data from? How are things getting updated? How is your system learning? So it's one thing for me to take data one time and set up a system, but it's another thing for the system to then interact with the world and keep improving itself, right? And that's where the aspect of learning really comes in. So how are you updating the system? So if you ask questions like this, you can get closer to understanding if indeed they are using machine learning, or it's just a, for the lack of a better term, a dumb system where I have one time put in instructions and then it's just faithfully following those, right? And
Got it.
that's a big
That's a
difference.
helpful. That's quite helpful. I mean, seeing whether pattern recognition and independently arriving at judgments, or judgment is perhaps the wrong word in this case, but predictions, shall I say, of a possibility seems to be underlying what would get counted as artificial intelligence. So you work in a field which is, I mean, which is marketing. It isn't technology per se. And you write a lot about how a lot of organizations use tactics, artificial intelligence tactically, but not strategically. What do you mean by that?
So what I've seen is, and this is across the world, right? I mean, this is not just in Europe, for example, where I'm based, or US, where I was, or Asia. I've seen this across the world. What happens is, executives or managers, they really like this new toy that they have, which is machine learning or these new techniques, and then they go about trying to find out, saying, okay, what problem can I solve with this? So, okay, oh, this is a cool thing. Maybe I can do some advertising with this. Maybe I can use this for recruitment. Maybe I can use this for this, that, the other. There's really no big picture plan. There's no big picture goal at the organization level or the company level or the strategy level as to how I'm going to use it in a consistent, steady way so that it benefits the entire organization. Right? It's firefighting. Saying, okay, I have this pressing issue. Can I throw machine learning at it? Let me try. Let me try. Maybe machine learning will work because I've heard it's cool, right? Or something along those lines. So what I've really found is that there's really no thinking as to, what are the big picture type of problems for which I can do this. What do I need inside my organization so that not only do I use this system to solve these problems, but the organization as a whole benefits, and I benefit from, for example, the economies of scale and scope that might develop if I apply this across the organization. And then consequently, like I talk about, how does this change my business models? And then what does this mean for, from a regulatory perspective, but more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, from an ethical perspective for an organization? Because, like I often like to say, it's a very slippery slope. And we can talk about this later. So broadly speaking, you've got to think about three things when you're doing this. So first of all, you've got to think about the infrastructure of your organization. This is a big investment, right? This is not a small thing. You need huge amounts of, like I said, computing power. You need data. So you either need to find ways of getting data from somewhere, or you need to have systems of collecting data inside your organization. So think about it. I mean, you can use this for in finance, obviously. So let's say you want to reduce your accounts receivable. You want to use this for purchase. You want to use it for reducing bad loans. All of these are viable applications that have been implemented. You want to use it in HR. Absolutely. You've got to start somewhere. You've got to get the data from somewhere. If you're going to use it in HR, you need to first digitize all the applicants who applied, for example, to your company in the last 10 years. You need to remove all the biases. You need to clean the data, right? You need to get managers to sit down and say, hey, please sit down and code each of these, saying, were they good, bad? Did we call them for a shortlist 10 years ago or not? This is a lot of work, right? It just does not, you can just wake up one day and say, oh yeah, I'm going to use machine learning for recruitment, and it happens. It doesn't work that way. So there's an entire infrastructure, both in terms of technology as well as people, that you need to put in place. Once you do that, then you can start thinking about, how am I going to change my processes? How am I going to change my entire business models? So if I'm in marketing, for example, right? I mean, am I going to completely change the way customers are acquired? Am I going to change the way customers are retained? Am I going to change the way promotion happens from tomorrow? Right? Am I going to change the way new products are being innovated? All of those things. And all of this, finally, you've got to make sure that it happens within the rubric of, am I stepping beyond the line? Because the slippery slope here is that, with these technologies, what you will very quickly discover is that, I can come to you always and say, hey, look, if you give me this one little bit more data about your customers, I can really benefit you a lot. So I can come and say, hey, Shalini, if you can just give me this one small data, your bonus for next year can go up 3 or 4%. And it sounds innocuous, right? I mean, it says, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what's wrong? one more data point at this point. But then it becomes one more and one more. I say, can I also get the medical history of your, and I'm telling you, 10% increase in your bonus, right? And can I also, track your cell phones now? And then can I also see what you're doing here and there and what your kids are doing? And then very quickly we have gone beyond the line without realizing it, because
Actually,
you
since
can get these things.
yeah, since you're on the topic now, let me speak to obviously a Netflix documentary that is extremely popular, and I know you have watched it too, The Social Dilemma, and that speaks to ethical challenges of yet another kind. Um, what would be your thoughts around, whether, uh, because elements of social dilemma are, I guess, what would loosely be called customer. In that case, it's like how much time do you spend on that particular platform? So I'm not sure what the technical term is, but customer, shall I say, attention grabbing, for lack of a better technical word, which would also perhaps fall within the purview of maybe some of the kinds of questions that marketing looks at. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts around, you know, the overreach that you just spoke about, and the implications of, and what even counts as overreach? Because in this case, you know, um, I think the lines are extremely blurred. Where is the ethical line? So wondering what your thoughts are around some of that.
So there's two broad questions, and the second one is much tougher, and I'll get to that eventually. So I think if you want to talk about things like customer engagement, that's absolutely a marketing thing. And at the end of the day, so I want to start off by saying that I don't believe that companies are intrinsically evil, right? Whether it's Facebook in the social dilemma, or Google, or whomever, right? Or Huawei, that there's a lot of noise going on, for example, in the West. Companies are not intrinsically evil. Companies are driven by incentives. So if the incentive for Facebook is that, hey, if I keep you engaged for 5 minutes longer, then I can make 10 cents more off of you, and multiply that by the 1.8 billion people who visit my website every day. Then I will try to do that. I will try to keep you longer. And if keeping you longer means feeding you stuff that is iffy, then that's and what I'll do. I'm not doing it because I want to feed you iffy stuff. I'm doing it because that's how my incentives are aligned. At the end of the day, we are humans. We respond to incentives. So it's a very simple thing in that context. Uh, the trouble there is that now we are under the threat of being essentially governed by 2, 3, 4 algorithms, which basically run our life.
Mm.
Okay, so the gatekeeper to the internet, unless you are in China, is basically Google. That's where all of us originate our internet. So that's the gatekeeper to the internet. Again, outside of China, the predominant social network is Facebook, and that includes obviously Instagram and WhatsApp. Which is one big happy family in some senses. So it's and if you want to go shopping, again, outside of China, or some parts, it's basically Amazon. So there's 2 or 3, maybe 4 algorithms out there that are essentially running our lives today, whether we know this or not. Whether you're ordering a taxi on Uber or Ola, or what show you're watching on Netflix, or what song you're listening to on Spotify, what you're ordering on Amazon, how much you're paying for it. All of those are run by the same 3 or 4 algorithms, which is slightly unhealthy in some senses. In a very general sense, it's a little unhealthy. So I think there is a need from society, but also from regulators, to try and balance some of those incentives. How we do that? I mean, there's no easy way to do that. Most of these companies work on the famous network effect kind of a model, where my value in the network is dependent on the total number of people in the network. So the reason why I go on WhatsApp is because all my family and friends are on WhatsApp. There's nothing specific about WhatsApp that I like, but if I want to connect with my long lost friends, that's the place where I'll find them. Right. And once I'm on it, I basically cannot leave, because if there's another service better than WhatsApp, I cannot leave because the network is still inside here.
Yeah.
So it's all driven by network effect. So even if I chop WhatsApp into 2 parts, WhatsApp 1 and WhatsApp 2, eventually one of those two will collapse and they'll again merge. Right, like the Terminator, in that movie. So there's nothing we can do about this. So this is so regulators need to step in. Society needs to decide how to do this. There is really no easy way to do this. Companies by themselves, I don't think, because of the way the incentives align, their honestly speaking, their duty is towards their shareholders, right? That's legally what they are bound by. And their shareholders are telling them, hey, if I can get 10 more cents by keeping Shalini on, I need to get 10 more cents from Shalini. That's how life works. Now, the second part of your question is much even harder than this, because your question was, how do you know you've crossed the line? One rule of thumb that I like to tell executives is, if you're only following regulations, you've probably crossed the line. That's a good way to know, because regulations, especially in this field, especially in things like machine learning, especially in things like any companies that deal with the network effect and platform, are hopelessly outdated, right? I mean, even if they've been set in this decade, the field is moving so quickly, things are changing so rapidly that a lot of the things don't make sense. I advocate for this. I advocate for having a chief ethics officer, like a CEO, but of a different kind, a chief ethics officer, who's really responsible for setting the goalposts and the guidelines within the organization. Because like I say, if you say, yeah, I'm perfectly, which is often, for example, the argument that Facebook makes, saying, hey, we are following all regulations. Yeah, but that's not enough in today's day and age, right? I mean, if you're following all regulations, you're letting hate speech onto Facebook, you're letting fake news on there, you're letting really horrible videos be posted on there, and you're doing nothing about it, because regulations say freedom of speech. You need to have your own internal compass uh, that decides, saying this is a line we will not cross, even if it means loss of revenue. A principle is only a principle if it costs you something. Okay, it's not a principle if it's on paper. Otherwise, it's just nonsense. And the tricky thing with this is, even within a company, it's going to vary by department. It's going to vary by geography, right? I mean, what's okay in Switzerland, for example, may not be okay in India, or may not be okay in Saudi Arabia, and a company might need to operate in all those places. So even within a company, you might need to have different guidelines and benchmarks all over the place. And again, this is not regulation. Your line probably ought to be well before where the regulation starts, and then you have to have someone responsible for implementing it throughout the company.
That's really helpful because last week we had Professor Hoffman join and we spoke about ethics in robotics. And obviously, it's a big challenge there as well. And we spoke about the fact that, technology moves at a speed which is far ahead of society's own understanding of the implications of that technology. And therefore, what might be ways to move ahead. I do like the idea of a chief ethics officer as someone internally who's responsible for drawing that line, since that line itself is perhaps going to be, so dependent on what the organization does, what it wants to do, how ethical or not does it wish to be, and and how does it want to interpret it. So I'm just going to take a few comments and questions. So firstly, hi Vijay, hi Jawahar, and hi Jamshed. Pallav says, from theory to reality, on ground, lots of gaps are there. In reality, it's not data which triggers and everything. I'm sure, Pallav, I'm absolutely sure. If there's a question at the back of it, do add that in. Anil says, Dear Amit, nice hearing you always. Thanks for your talk today. I just want to know all data analysis we were doing for the last few decades, example, market forecasting, all process improvements. We went through data analysis during Six Sigma programs, warranty analysis. Now, how is AI different from what we were doing? Or is it another business jargon?
So I think that's a valid question, and honestly speaking, for a huge number of the applications that you actually see, for example, most of the things, Anil, you're talking about, things like market forecasting, Six Sigma, warranty analysis. For that, AI is going to be used incrementally. Okay, so what AI is going to do, what machine learning, forget AI is a wrong term to use in this context, right? What machine learning is going to do is, it's going to do what you were already doing 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It might do this 10% better, right? There's nothing wrong with this, right? I mean, if for example, if machine learning can come in and it can optimize your supply chain even 3% better, that's going to save you millions. But it's going to do stuff that you were doing already, and it's going to do this slightly better. If you're in finance, you were giving loans for thousands of years, right? I mean, the financial field has been giving loans since the beginning of humanity, essentially. What I can do today is I can give those loans and I can reduce the amount of bad loans, for example. There's no rocket science. There is nothing new intrinsically about machine learning. Let us not forget that. Machine learning is pattern recognition. It is driven by the same statistics we've been using decades ago. As a matter of fact, some of the statistics that's used in machine learning is 300 years old. So some of you might be familiar with Bayesian networks. They were invented in the 1700s. And Bayesian networks is one of the huge drivers underlying machine learning for some of the techniques. And if you really crack open machine learning, what you'll find is all the familiar names that you might be familiar with if you've done statistics. K-means clustering, logistic regression, simple regression in many cases. So technologically, there is absolutely nothing new about machine learning. It's just that it allows you to do find patterns which was simply not possible before. If you and I are running regressions, or you and I are running logistic regressions or k-means, there's a certain number of parameters that we can consider before our brains will get fried. Right? We just don't have the capacity as humans to do this. But this system can consider thousands and thousands, maybe millions of parameters with no problems. And that's where the strength comes from. Okay? So
I think
that's how I would address it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It's the volume of data and the multiple dimensions along which,
That's what
the
it is.
technology has the power to, seek patterns, which is beyond our
Exactly.
own personal
Mhm.
capacity. So let me then ask you, Amit, because a lot of leaders today, organizational leaders, business leaders, or even marketing leaders haven't necessarily grown up with, artificial intelligence or advanced analytics being part of their vocabulary or repertoire. Now, if you were say a business leader, what would you think are some very reasonable questions which a CMO or someone in that capacity can think of answering better through artificial intelligence than perhaps any of the other tools?
So broadly speaking, we can categorize, the types of problems, if you will, that machine learning can be applied to in marketing, specifically in marketing. We can classify them into three types. So the first one is deals with what's known as bounded rationality in science, which is that our brains can only make sense of so many things at a given time. We have limitations in our brains. The smartest of us even have limitations in our brains, but machines have. It's not like they don't have limitations, but their limitations are significantly lesser than ours. Like I said, they can consider thousands of factors. So, for example, when you're running an advertising campaign, if a standard system or a standard team of managers can only consider a few dozen factors, a machine could consider thousands, maybe millions of factors that are going on. It could even consider saying, "Hey, when this ad ran, what was the temperature and humidity, and when you saw this ad, and what was the ambient lighting, and maybe that affects how that ad affected you." Who the heck knows, right? This is something that we would not even think about, but this is stuff that machines can do. And you can use this for incredible things like fraud detection, for example, programmatic advertising, acquiring customers, like I said, retaining customers. So fraud detection is a way of retaining customers for banks, for example. And, if I'm faster than anybody else in detecting fraud, I cut down on it. It reduces my cost. It makes it easier for me to retain customers. You can find strange things. So, for example, using these kinds of techniques, we find that if you're using a mobile device and the typing speed on a mobile device is faster than normal, it's probably some fraud that's happening. It's probably not you that's typing. We would never have figured these things out manually, right? These patterns can only come up because of some kind of machine learning kind of things. So that's the first application, which is finding inference in massive data, which we could not do yesterday. And again, there's tons of applications of that. The second kind of application with this is it's a changed it's a changed perspective on risk. So if you really think about risk, a lot of risk arises because the forecasts that we make are uncertain. Now, what we are saying is that okay, so obviously not when something like COVID is striking, but under a normal run of the mill situation, uh, you can make significantly better forecasts than you could do previously, whether it's for new products, whether it's for new campaigns, whether it's for new individuals that I want to hire in my organization, or new instruments in finance or something like that I want to bring about. I can do a significantly better forecast. So the element of risks attached to innovation is going to go down. right? It's not going to become zero, but the element of risk attached to innovation is going to go down. So I suspect what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot more micro incremental innovation, a lot more new product launches, and this is going to make the world much more competitive place, right? I mean, the level of competition is going to go up even more. And finally, the huge, and this is slightly controversial and goes to my point about ethics. The huge role of of machine learning is in contract enforcement. So if you really think about how contracts have been written up and enforced basically throughout history, the underlying principle is that I cannot observe how much effort you're putting in. So what I do is I observe the outcome. Okay, so if I'm an employee of IMD cannot really observe what I'm doing in my office 24 hours a day and at home 24 hours a day, right? So they say, hey, look, what we're going to do is we're going to see the outcome that you have in your courses, what people think of you, and those kinds of things. But we all realize that that's a very imperfect measure of what's going on, because I could be putting the effort and I could just be unlucky, or I could be doing nothing and I could be lucky, or whatever, many combinations of this. What machine learning allows us in some senses is it allows us to track effort. Okay, so let me give you an example. So there are already banks in China, for example, that are using the CCTV cameras that are present inside every bank branch on the planet, and they're using that to see the quality of the tellers. So I don't need to wait till the end of the year and survey customers to ask, saying, how was the service that you received from Amit? I can see live from the CCTV camera the kind of service that you're providing. And then I can have a machine learning algorithm in the background kind of tagging it. But so now I can start rewarding you based on the amount of effort you provide rather than the amount of outcome that you get. And that, if you think about it, changes a lot of things. It changes how organizations are designed, because all our incentives, all organizations are designed around this idea of outcome-based structures rather than input-based structures. So that's a huge change that's possible. But obviously, ethical
Yeah,
issues is
yeah. I think the first two are perhaps a little easier to work with. Uh, you know, the understanding of risk very differently, the possibilities of innovation, the seeing patterns with variables you didn't even think of because there was perhaps no reason to. Uh, the third one seems to be in the realm of surveillance almost. So I can see that it's a pretty tricky slope, which you yourself speak about, that the lines are, I mean, we don't even know where the lines are for the most part anymore. And it's technology's ability to allow us to do things like surveillance is increasing so rapidly. And in the lockdown, in fact, many organizations have experimented with some of these surveillance like technologies to track effort amongst employees, to see how much time is actually being spent on machines, etc., etc. So yeah, I think that's a really, really tricky one. Any examples, Amit, of places or organizations which you think have a really good strategy for the use of AI in marketing, and what are the kinds of questions that they're using artificial intelligence for?
So let me give you two examples. The first one is actually an example of something that you just mentioned, which is this tracking technology and surveillance, which I think, and I want to give this example because I think it's a positive example, right? I mean, when we think of this, we naturally start thinking about Big Brother and, oh yeah, these things might happen in China, but it's never going to happen anywhere else in the world kind of thing. But I think, used in the right way with the right intentions, this thing is powerful. So I'm working with a very large construction company. It's a massive construction giant worldwide. And what they realized is, based on the research, they realized that on an average construction site, a worker walks about 4 miles per day. Okay, 4 miles per day, and a lot of the time they're going to pick up tools and equipment and going up and down and going this. And there's two problems with this. First is obviously safety and hazard, because these sites are extremely, I mean, they're dangerous places to be, right? I mean, and secondly, as a consequence of doing this, because of fatigue or because of whatever reason, you often end up picking up the wrong tool, you often end up picking up the wrong equipment or the wrong part, and you're already on the seventh floor, and I'm not going to go back down again. So you end up putting the wrong parts in the wrong place, which further adds to complications and the integrity of the structure. So what they did is they basically installed an app on the cell phones of the workers, which could not only track, how much they were walking, what they were doing, but also what kind of equipment they were picking up, and they could tag them. And they managed to reduce the amount of walking by 2 miles. I mean, we basically cut it in half, while at the same time reducing the kind of errors that were being made. Now, if I apply these technologies to something like this, who's not going to be in favor of this? The other huge examples of where this has benefited massively is on oil platforms. Again, incredibly dangerous places to work, right? But what these systems can do, and again, these are wearables, either wearables in terms of some kind of sensors on you, or you can even put it on your cell phone, or you can put it on your watch or something like that. It can tell you, saying, hey, you know what, I think you're fatigued, you must take a break now. And they're already seeing reduced accidents and those. So the potential for this is massive. So now, to answer the question that you actually asked, which is, can I have, are there some organizations that are really doing this well, they're doing this in a strategic way? uh, I don't want to talk about the usual digital giants, right? I mean, obviously, those people were born digital and they're doing a lot with these technologies. But a company that I really like in terms of applying this, and this is not a company that people usually think about when we're talking about machine learning or analytics, is actually Disney. So Disney is actually a fantastic company that has a very clear strategy for what it's going to do. Like I said, it has incredible infrastructure in place to do this. As a matter of fact, their analytics group has about 1,000 people, including about 200 PhDs. You would not expect this of Disney. And the kind of implementation that they're doing with this is simply amazing. And again, this kind of sort of goes to I wouldn't call it surveillance, but tracking. But the outcomes are simply amazing. So what Disney did is obviously it's got multiple businesses, but one of its key businesses is theme parks. Disneyland and those kinds of things all over the world. Uh, what these folks did is they came up with this thing called a magic band. Okay, so it's just one of those rubber bands that kids wear, we wear. Sometimes we're supporting an organization and we wear a band, but this thing has an RFID chip in it. So the way it works is that if you're going, you and your family, for example, are going to Disney parks, and you buy a ticket, you buy 4 tickets, and maybe you're staying in the Disney hotel, and those kinds of package deals. They will send you a magic band, right? So before your trip is to start, they will send you to your home, they will send you a magic band. And the moment you land up in whatever city you're going to, you're wearing that magic band. That band becomes everything for you. So they will identify you with that band, they will scan you in, they will put you on a bus, they will take you to that band is your hotel key, that band is your park passes, that band is where you can order food and buy stuff while you're in the park. You don't need anything else. And the kind of things I can do with this, because I've got this, I'm now tracking you within the park, obviously, but I know where all the other thousands of people within the park are as well. So I can do things like, you're standing in line, you're waiting in line, and it's a 1 hour line for this particular ride. I can send you, and I know this because of your band, I can send you a message saying, hey, look, I see that you're standing in line for this particular roller coaster. There's a 1 hour line for this. But just a 5 minute walk away, there is a roller coaster for which there's only a 20-minute line. Why don't you go to that roller coaster and come back, and I'll hold your place in line for you, right? So I'm increasing the utilization of the park without adding any more infrastructure. Moreover, I can order food online for my family, and then it can track saying, hey, it's close to noon, and this group of people is walking towards the restaurant. Oh, so it'll send a message to the restaurant saying, get their food ready. So the moment you sit down, within a couple of minutes, hot food is ready in front of you. It's literally like magic. And then I can start tracking your preferences. I can know saying, hey, I know from this band that Shalini is allergic to peanuts, for example. So 3 years later, when Shalini decides to take a Disney cruise, I already have that information. And the level of customer service I can provide is just at a different league, right? So now I'm acquiring customers, I'm retaining customers, I'm reducing my costs, I'm increasing my utilization, and it's just mind-blowing the kinds of things that they're doing. So this was a great example
That was a really good example. That's a really good example. I mean, the first example was, it reminded me a little bit of, the earlier time motion studies and observational studies, which were used for efficiency. And of course, this is way more sophisticated, but at the heart of it, it's the same thing, right? So how do we do this?
what we were doing yesterday, but now we can do it much more powerfully.
Much better, right? And
That's
I think the second example was a great example, and I had just briefly read about it, but I love the way you told the Disney story of how so many elements of efficiency could be integrated along with the kind of customization we've grown to expect because it's offered by all the platforms we visit. As a Zomato or a Swiggy remember our food preferences. Amazon remembers what we
right.
like to buy. And of course, Netflix is very good at predicting what we're likely to watch. So let me just take a few more questions. So, Kunal, is it talking about AI and machine learning in corporate? I think so, right? I think
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Pallav Joshi, business beyond social media, MSME, no one is emphasizing data. Vatsal says self-regulation is key. Thank you for talking about a chief ethical officer. I actually think that's a really good suggestion, and I think just like this year, you know, in different with different nomenclatures, and a role for helping enabling work from home has emerged. I think chief ethical officer makes more and more sense given the number of technologies that are making their way into our way of work. uh, Pallav says academics need to bridge the gap between theory and reality. I've worked on both sides, and I can say there's a tremendous scope of integration. Pallav couldn't agree more. I mean, I sometimes like to
Agreed.
play that role of a bridge, to be honest, because I think there's so much at both ends that could learn from each other, yet they live a lot of the time in different worlds. I mean, IMD is probably an exception, but for the most part, they live in different worlds.
I
Um,
agree.
Sanjay, surveillance is clearly a major driver for the adoption of AI ML across segments of industry. I think that is probably true, explained by Professor Shoshana Zuboff in her book Surveillance Economy. Her views are radical but true.
Yeah, that's an
Nice
interesting book. Yeah.
listening. Papia Hai, Disney is a true pioneer of creativity. True, absolutely true. Influenced by customer insights and customer service excellence through creativity. Interestingly, I think Scott Galloway has been writing a little bit about what he thinks might be next steps for Disney. It's a company which has really been in the news for many of the right reasons, and
Yes.
this year
Yes.
in particular. Yeah.
I agree. I
Uh,
agree.
Avinash Desai, what will be the application of AI in design and creativity field? Hmm.
I think, Avinash, we're already seeing huge steps. So I read recently an article about this advertising agency in Russia. These guys are based out of Moscow, and then over the last year, these guys had this hot new designer, and this designer's designs were all over. Companies were loving it. His ads were all over. Print media as well as other media in Russia until somebody discovered this wasn't a person, this was AI that was coming up with all these designs. So we've already moved quite significantly far ahead in terms of AI doing quote unquote creativity. Now, what's really still happening is it's ingesting patterns from the past and it's coming up with new patterns in the future based off of those patterns with some randomness thrown in. But nonetheless, for human eyes and for human senses, that is as good as creativity. And if you're interested in that, Avinash, I recommend a book called The Creativity Code that talks about this in a lot more detail. It's a brilliant book. Bottom line, there are already massive applications of machine learning. I wouldn't call it AI. I would call it machine learning in the fields of design. Depends how you define creativity, but we are already seeing a lot of creativity, quote unquote, being demonstrated by machine learning. So yeah.
Hmm. I think one issue we didn't speak about in the conversation between AI and ethics is, bias, human bias passing on to some of these technologies. Any thoughts around what can be done with that?
So there's two broad things. So first of all, this is a major issue. Let's first acknowledge that this is a massive issue. There's two broad things that can be done. The first is at a human level, what we can do is we can try to remove some of the bias, not some, but as many biases as possible, and more importantly, be vigilant for the fact that this can do. Remember, AI is never biased. Okay, machine learning can never be biased. It's us who's
Yeah.
biased. right? And we just transfer our biases to this system, and then we say, oh yeah, look, the machine learning is biased. No, it's not, right? That's the wrong way to look at it. So first, identify the biases in your own systems, in your own data, in your own organization, and see if you can fix them, or see if you can identify them. Be at least rigid. The second thing we are doing is, from a technological perspective, is can we come up with machine learning technology that can bypass humans? Right? Can they come up with some of these things on their own? And there are some examples of doing this. They've not been done at scale. They've not been done as much in the industry as we are seeing more so in the labs. But nonetheless, technologically, what we are trying to do is saying, hey, look, if I know that humans usually make a lot of mistakes, why do I need to depend on humans to learn what to do? Can I not learn myself? And there's actually an algorithm called self-play, which teaches machine learning to learn by itself, making its own mistakes and relearning and so on and so forth. This is within a field called reinforcement learning that we are trying. Have we seen massive applications of this already out in the field? Not yet, because this is extremely resource intensive. But we'll develop this, and hopefully, in this decade, we'll come up with applications. But broadly speaking, those are the two issues. But yes, bias is a massive issue with this. Yes.
No, I think they're really good ways to look at it. First is just recognizing, and sometimes you can do something about it, sometimes you can't. But so long as you understand where the biases are, you can at least take some corrective action, whether it's in technology or in the humans, either way. And the second, as you said, are there other ways which don't incorporate human bias? So then, dear Shalini and Amit, all is well and great to hear from you. We have more opportunity, amounts of data required to analysis in the area of climate change, plant more trees. Thank you for that suggestion. Sanjay, Disney inspires every industry, and I cannot imagine anyone disliking Disney. Oh, well, you'll be surprised.
You'll be surprised. Exactly. I was just going to
Disney is
say that.
quite, yeah,
Yes.
it evokes extreme reactions, I would say.
By the way, as a marketing person, I think that's a sign of a great brand. All great brands should evoke extreme reactions, right? Anytime I find a brand which everybody likes, I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. But anytime a brand, I find people who say, I hate this brand. And a great example is Apple. You've got people who hate Apple. And I say that's a sign of a terrific brand, because now you're standing for something, that you really, really have a very crystal clear positioning, and you're standing for something. So I think that's actually it's a positive sign that some people hate Disney. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah.
true, true. Um Shantanu, logistic and transport industry. Can you please share some light? Any marketing related examples from logistics and transport?
Absolutely. I
Airlines,
mean, what?
perhaps?
Sorry, airlines? Yes, absolutely. Airlines in the good old days when we could actually fly.
Yeah,
In terms of airlines, what they're doing in terms of retaining customers, identifying the top level customers, retaining customers. And in this context, the airlines are actually learning from the casino industry. The casino industry has been incredible. And they were actually the pioneers in understanding who their best customers are and figuring out ways to retain them, all the way going back to the 80s, before they
Hmm.
started with hand stuff. That's one application. The other application is obviously in improving the brute force supply chain. Uh, the clear examples in this is the giants, Amazon, Alibaba, JD in China. What those folks have done for logistics. I mean, think about it now, right? I mean, 2 day delivery has become the norm all over the world in such a short time. There's nothing magical about 2 day
Yeah,
delivery. It's just that Amazon has come in and Alibaba has come in the East. And what they have said is that we're going to optimize our supply chains to the point where we're going to basically kill everyone who cannot do a 2 day delivery. So today, if I see somebody telling me a 3 day delivery, I'm thinking, what's wrong with you? This is so backwards. And they are crunching it further and further, so that definitely in the more dense cities in the West, but I'm sure soon in the denser cities in India as well, you're going to have same day delivery, few hour delivery if it's not already started. I know it's
it's there.
already
Yeah,
started by some of those, and this is coming from small incremental changes in logistics, Shantanu. So this is, again, like I said, this is the same optimization we were doing 100 years ago, for example. But the power that we have now is allowing us to do these kinds of things. So the effect might only be 10%, 15%, but the impact is massive at the back end of something like this. So huge applications in there.
that's a good example because my daughter, for instance, wanted a new chair. in her room. And she liked to chat, but they said 15 days delivery. So it was completely out. Like the moment she
Topical
saw it, was
question.
like, okay. Yeah. So, it's true that all of this impacts, who's going to buy? And certainly for young people, 15 days, actually, even for us, 15 days seems like very too much now.
I mean, in a lot of cities around the world, and you can think about this wherever you folks live, the entire behavior of how we travel inside a city has changed because of rideshare. Right? Previously,
Yeah.
we used to think, either I need to take my own car, or if not, I need to on some form of public transportation or something, or take a cab or something like that. And now, a lot of places, the arrival time for rideshare in I know, I'm giving these examples because I know about these cities. So San Francisco, New
Yeah.
York, those kind. It takes less than 30 seconds for an Uber to arrive,
Mm.
right? So this has changed the complete behavior of people. People have started walking less. People have started taking public transportation less, right? The layout of the cities is going to change as a consequence. How we where we put our shops is going to change, because if I'm not, earlier I used to say, it's just half a kilometer down the road and the weather is
Mm.
okay. What the heck? I just walk. Now I say, yeah,
Mm.
what the heck? I just can Uber. It takes 30 seconds for an Uber to come. Why do I want to walk? It's completely changing our behavior, and as a consequence, what businesses do. So this is again coming from logistics.
No, no, that's true. I think Uber and Ola in India really did change commuting behavior. Of course, this year is a completely different story because of COVID, and I think they must have lost a lot of business because people have been much more hesitant to take, shared rides.
Exactly.
Uh, so I think we're almost at the end of our time. I'll just see if there is any other question. Hi, Avinash. Avinash says, great, thanks. There are a few more comments. Anil, thanks. Sanjay is asking about financial institutions. Any financial has used AI ML to transform financial services, but why are we not finding any company outside China? You've written about this, so that's why I'm going to ask this one question. So, Sanjay, actually, Amit has written an article this year, if I'm not mistaken, about how there aren't as many examples outside China in Asia uh, of delivering scale of transformation. So, Amit, what are
Yeah,
your
but
thoughts
actually,
on that?
this is true, because so what's happened is the Chinese giants have not been able to replicate their success outside. But Sanjay, specifically in the financial area, I mean, I work with. I mean, I'm in Switzerland, right? So I work with banks quite a bit, but also US-based banks. Uh, the kind of machine learning application in those banks and the kinds of transformation is mind blowing. Let me give you one example. Goldman Sachs, right? So it's one of the world's biggest banks and one of the most powerful ones. And they're especially powerful in their investment banking division, or they used to be. So. And investment banking, I mean, if obviously you're in finance, so you'll know this. It's literally at the highest rung of finance in terms of in terms of the returns it gives to the banks, as well as the intellectual capital that's usually required to drive that particular field. So investment banking, well, within investment banking, so for example, things like IPOs, developing new IPOs. Goldman Sachs analyzed their IPO process. What they found is that they have 127 specific steps in their IPO process. Today, they can automate half of those using machine learning, right? So you are seeing massive transformation of the banking sector right before your eyes. Think about it, money transfer today. So if I have to send any money to India or transfer money to US or whatever that is, I am not stepping inside a bank. I've not seen the inside of a bank in years. I'm using apps. I'm using things like TransferWise or Revolut. For mergers and acquisitions today, you've got an app called Axial, AXIL. It's funny. It's known as the Tinder of merger and acquisition. It's literally
Mhm.
like Tinder, right? You create a profile of your company, and then it'll use machine learning to find matches for you, and you can swipe right and swipe left. And they actually, now what these folks are doing is they are completely killing massive investment banks whose bread and butter used to be mergers and acquisitions. So the entire banking scene is changing, but this is true even in Asia. I work with massive banks in Thailand and in Malaysia and Indonesia, and the The statement now is banking is necessary, but banks are not,
Yeah.
and that's what we're seeing all around the world. So
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I realize, Amit, that we're at the end of our time. I think this was really, really interesting. I think there are two, three really big ideas that I'm taking from our conversation today. The first, the big one is that, some of the statistical techniques behind artificial intelligence have actually been around forever. But what has really changed is the scale at which these can be used and the number of dimensions, etc. And I think that's really helpful because I think a lot of people do ask that what is new about this, and this helps answer what is new. And what is new is just the sheer scale at which you can use it, and therefore the things you can do with that kind of learning. I think it was really good the way you explained the difference between advanced analytics and AI as a tool, because I think a lot of these words are used almost interchangeably. It sort of means, in the universe of using technology to get insights from data, even if, how that technology works could be a little different. I think that was really, really helpful. I absolutely love the suggestion of a chief ethics officer, because I think we are going to see more and more ethical issues that are not going to be easy at all. And I think it'll be very hard for regulators to take the entire the entire responsibility of crafting that out. And regulators are likely to lag behind technology by quite a few years. So that's a big challenge. And of course, you gave some excellent examples which spoke about, in a sense, operational efficiency coming together with customer engagement and retention, and therefore marketing. So, it was really, really interesting because it wasn't just about, should I run this kind of a Facebook campaign or that kind of a Facebook
exactly.
campaign. It's much deeper. It's about how do we design, in a sense, the whole customer experience differently or operational experience differently by using some of the processing abilities which AI provides. So thank you so much. That was really, really helpful.
Shalini, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. It's really nice to be stimulated by wonderful questions, and hope to see you folks around. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So I hope you really enjoyed today's conversation with Professor Joshi. I think he had a lot of really great points. And if you want to read more of what he writes, just Google him and see his webpage on the IMD faculty list. He writes a lot for the MIT Sloan Review as well, which is what I subscribe to. So you can read some of his articles there. Now, we're going to have our next conversation after 2 weeks, and it's on a topic that's actually really, really interesting to me. We have Professor Bob Cullen, who teaches at Anderson, Duke, and Columbia, speak about whether business improv can help leaders respond differently to fast-changing business situations. So it's such an intriguing and interesting thesis, and we're going to ask him questions around how that might transfer to developing leaders of tomorrow. So do join us. A replay of our conversation today will be available on my LinkedIn profile right after we end, and of course on Uncube's website by Monday. So do visit us, and if you liked the conversation, share it with your friends, like, comment, share. And with that, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much.